I am sure I do not know what you mean, but we still have work to do. This is the work left over from your little break. I do hope you will hurry up and finish it. There are a great many ceremonies to be held at the end of the year, so I suggest you operate on the assumption that you will not be able to take any more vacations. Yes, I know. Jinchi smiled bitterly and resolved to do his work. There was certainly plenty of it. Maomao, he said. Yes, sir. Jinchi recalled that there was one other matter he still had to attend to. I'd like to ask you to deliver 3 letters for me. He opened a drawer in his desk. Yes, sir. To whom? She looked at him with a questioning expression. Her questions increased when she saw the addresses on the letters. As soon as possible, if you would, but keep it as secret as you can. And please have a carriage readied. Yes, sir. She understood this was not something she should investigate too closely. Instead, she simply took the letters and left the room. I suppose it may be too soon, but so be it, Jinchi said. He had no special talents, and if he dawdled, he would be too late. He needed to make his move before then. Still, he really would have liked to have him in my debt. Jinchi let out a long sigh and sat back at his desk. Chapter 20. Check. It was the middle of the night, and Maomao was rattling along in a carriage. A letter had arrived for her after she finished work for the day. It was from Jinchi, and it had been brought very discreetly. She wondered what he wanted. His summons had never yet been good news for her, and she did not have high hopes for that changing. She could not refuse his request. They had last met at the Go tournament. Though she disliked admitting it, his presence had been comforting. She knew Jinchi could not surprise her when he was there. But now I wonder where I am going. A ride in a carriage usually meant she was travelling to the residence of someone important. That could be Duke's villa, Empress Jayakai's palace, or Jinchi's pavilion. However, they were going in the opposite direction from Jinchi's chambers now. The more lavish the buildings around her became, the more profusely and unpleasantly Maomao began to sweat. When the carriage reached its destination and she was invited to disembark, Sugen was waiting for her. It has been quite a while, she remarked. Yes, ma'am, said Maomao. You will have to excuse the lack of ceremony, but I would like you to come inside and undress. Maomao said nothing and just shuffled reluctantly into the building. One's body had to be searched upon entrance to the rear palace. Was this something similar? Master Jinchi summoned me, Maomao remarked after a moment. Yes, and if it were only the young master, we wouldn't have to go through this silliness, Sugen replied. Someone else had been here. Sugen took Maomao's robe from her. She pulled out a writing kit, a pad of paper, some medicine and bandages, one after another. She looked quite exasperated. Do you always carry all of this with you? She asked. I left my sewing kit at home, replied Maomao. Meanwhile, she removed even her undergarment, exposing her scrawny body to the cold air. She got goosebumps. What are you, a squirrel? Open your mouth. I had better check your cheeks. It was bad enough to have to strip naked, and now Sugen was peering around inside her mouth. Your teeth are very straight, Maomao, the old lady in waiting observed approvingly. Hank who hurry hutch, said Maomao, and your skin is so smooth. But perhaps you could remove this. Sugen peeled back the bandage on Maomao's left arm. Since Yao had forbidden her from hurting herself, it was in comparatively good shape. Why was I called here? Maomao asked. Oh, you can't tell me, you have no idea. She said, I wonder if you are prepared. Her tone was teasing, but that actually made Maomao feel more at ease. Is His Majesty present today? All this effort to ensure she was unarmed suggested someone of considerable importance would be there. The searches in the rear palace had been rather simpler, but there had always been guards around there. She learned that several guards were posted outside the room whenever the emperor visited one of his consorts. It is not fun teasing you, Maomao. Do you not wonder if you were called here for a tryst? I cannot say it did not cross my mind. Despite his flaws, Jinchi usually followed the rules. I wanted to believe he wouldn't do something so sudden. If this was where things were going, I would at least take a bath, not just put on fresh clothes. She put her arms through the sleeves of her robe, then wiped away her freckles. She dusted her cheeks with white powder. When she finished changing, she was led to a door. Soldiers guarded the door and bowed as she entered. Beyond the door was another hall, and beyond that a room. Dim light shone at her feet, illuminating a single path. It almost lit the way to another world. The room was warm inside. Maomao could hear the crackling of a brazier mixed with the chatting and laughter of 3 nobles. I have brought her, sir, Sugen said. Then she bowed and left the room. Maomao was speechless when she saw who was there. Jinshi and the emperor she had expected, but not Empress Gyokyu. The space was actually 2 rooms next to each other, with the sliding door between them open. The second room looked like a bedchamber. The first room, where the 3 august people sat, had a couch, a table and a desk. The furnishings were remarkable, and a striking aroma drifted through the room. What is that smell? Maomao wondered. It seemed familiar, but she could not place it. This being a room full of nobles, she hoped she could assume it was nothing dangerous. Moon Prince, you have gathered a most interesting company. Whatever do you have in mind? Gyokyu said, hiding her mouth with her sleeve as she laughed. I agree, the emperor said jovially, and I wonder the same thing. He continued, with her here, I'm sure it's something very intriguing indeed. It feels downright domestic here. What is going on? No matter how you looked at it, Maomao was out of place in this room. Was she here simply to relax with the 3 of them? She could not see any ladies in waiting or guards, not even Gaoshun or Hongyang. Keeping her head bowed, she puzzled over what she should do. Was she here to amuse the high folk? What ridiculous antics would she be put to? Let me see if I can remember some good jokes from the pleasure quarter. Perhaps Gyokyu might enjoy them very much, but they seemed likely to fall flat with Jinshi. Those jokes often did not end well for the men who told them. It was best to keep her own thoughts to herself. If she had known what was happening, she could have been better prepared. Perhaps she could have brought one of her night visit manuals, but that wouldn't have helped much either. The emperor enjoyed those books, but she could not display them in front of Gyokyu, and anyway, Suhin would have found and confiscated them during her search. She was still wondering what she should do, what she could do, if there might be some entertaining little act she could perform. Then she saw something that made her doubt her own eyes. On a tray was a sprinkling of sand. Upon the sand, a branch and a stone had been placed almost carelessly. It seemed intended to evoke a garden, a little something to delight visitors. However, it was the materials of that garden that had Maomao's attention. Velvet antler, long goo, and is that bear gall? Velvet antler was the antler of a deer. Long goo, or dragon's bone, referred to large fossilized bones. Bear gall was exactly what it said, the gallbladder of a bear. All of these were medical ingredients of the most expensive kind. The antler was arranged to look like a tree branch. The long goo were presented like rocks. The bear gall was just sort of there, smack in the middle of everything. Was it placed there specifically so that Maomao would notice it? Are they mocking me? She thought, surely they would have known that such a prize would not escape her notice, no matter how casually it was placed. She feared she might start to drool as she gazed at the medicines. Whatever do you have in mind here? Empress Gyokyu asked. Is Maomao going to solve a fascinating mystery for us? Her eyes were sparkling. Maomao had wondered if everything would be all right between them, considering what had happened earlier. Judging by Gyokyu's current appearance, it looked like everything was fine. She suspected it might be different among the serving women. Hongyang might cut her some slack, but Hakuyu and her sisters were most likely less than pleased. These were people who were skeptical even of Gyokyu's half-brother. They probably weren't happy that she was meeting with Jinshi in person, even with His Majesty present. Maomao kept one eye on Gyokyu, but she let her gaze wander around the room. She soon found more medicinal goodies. The ink stone on the desk was actually donkey hide gelatin, a dark lump of gelatinous glue. Among the tea leaves she noticed mint and cinnamon. The unusual odor filling the room was likely a combination of these different medicines. No, Maomao's part is still to come. First, may I ask you to listen to what I have to say? Jinshi smiled widely and stirred the large brazier that stood near the far wall. I can do that, Maomao said, her eyes sparkling. She wondered if something might be in the brazier. No, not today, I summoned you here. Now I order you to have a seat, Jinshi said. He gestured to one end of the couch and Maomao had no choice but to sit. The upholstered seat was stuffed with cotton. Combined with the warm room, it made her awfully sleepy. No, she thought she had to stay awake. She gave her head a gentle shake and took a breath. If a fire was left burning too long, the air in the room could become bad and make it hard to breathe. There were no guards in the room and no windows either. It was perfect for a secret conference. At least there were a few vents to allow air to circulate. Maomao wondered what this rich collection before her could mean. She questioned their presence, considering how thoroughly she had been searched. Too much medicine could be poisonous. Almost anything could be dangerous depending on how you used it. She wondered if those white strips over there were poria. They sat in a bowl with chrysanthemum petals scattered on top. The medicines were displayed so conspicuously. Could this mean they would be given to her later? The emperor asked, "So what is this mysterious thing you wish to say to us?" He stroked his beard and narrowed his eyes. The expression was probing, but there was also a hint of kindness. Wine and appropriate accompaniments were on the table. Maomao's eyes lingered on the alcohol. It didn't seem she would need to taste it, though. The nobles were already pouring wine for each other. Drugs are good. "But I like wine too. Would you like some?" asked Empress Jyokayu. She had observed Maomao studying the drinks. "This wine is very good, isn't it, Majesty?" The Empress had weaned her child and could now enjoy some alcohol. Yes, thought Maomao. Strictly speaking, her social position should have prevented her from drinking anything while in this company. But if a superior invited her to a drink, it would have been unconscionable to refuse. Yes, she had no choice but to imbibe. Indeed, the emperor said, "This seems like good, true grape wine." The qualification suggested that talk of the poisonous wine had reached even the imperial ears. "I could never serve you anything poisonous, Your Majesty," Jinchi said. "I need you to live a good long time." He gave his glass drinking vessel a gentle shake. So Maomao wasn't going to get any wine after all. Jinchi was seated and had taken off his outer robe. Perhaps he was warm from the fire and the wine. "Are you sure there's no cup for Maomao, Moon Prince?" Jyokayu asked. Maomao looked at her with shining eyes. "No, Maomao can't drink yet. She will have work to do later." Maomao's spirits plummeted. She turned a withering look on Jinchi, but he hardly seemed to notice. "What work? I feel sorry for her, the only one left out of the drinking," the emperor said. "That's right, you tell him, and order him to give me that medicine." Maomao clenched her fists triumphantly. But Jinchi still showed no sign of getting an extra cup. Instead he said, "I need her if I am to make my request to you about the future of the throne." Now, you have been treating me like a doddering old man all night." "By no means, sir." "But does your Majesty share our former ruler's belief in mystical medicines that can prolong life or even confer immortality?" "May I presume not." "Hey, they might exist." Maomao was not pleased. It was true that no such medicine had yet been discovered. Even the wide array of ingredients in this room couldn't make one immortal. What is he driving at? "I wish he would hurry up and get to the point." Jinchi said, "I very much need your Majesty to survive for at least another 20 years. The number was so precise. Jyokayu said, "Moon Prince, you seem to have a very specific idea in mind." She could not help being somewhat unnerved. The emperor was in his mid-30s and was the picture of health. There was no reason he should not remain hale and hearty for quite some time. And what, may I ask, happens in 20 years? The slightest edge had entered his Majesty's voice. Maomao tensed despite herself. One could not allow oneself to forget that this lushly facial-haired man stood at the very top of the nation's hierarchy. Jinchi said, "That is when the crown prince will assume his royal title, and I can finally relax." Jyokayu was the one who spoke. "The crown prince?" she asked. "Yes, milady. He is 10 years old now, still a child. At 15 he will formally enter adulthood, but it would be hard to have full confidence in him at that time. By 20, well, he will still be rather young, it is true, but if we ensure that he is surrounded by good people before then, there would be no problem." What was Jinchi talking about? Maomao felt goosebumps rise on her skin despite the warm room. She might have even gone pale if she hadn't seen the caterpillar fungus and Mu Dan pie. The emperor set down his drink and narrowed his eyes. He no longer looked as though he was in a good mood. "Perhaps you would care to tell us what you base this scenario on." It wasn't really a suggestion, and that was what made it so scary. "If you just called me here to listen to unsettling conversations, please let me go home with souvenirs." Maomao wished she could plug her ears and hide in a corner of the room. Empress Jyokayu did not look much at ease either. She probably had not expected such an unpleasant topic with this company. Jinchi explained his reasoning. He said if anything were to happen to your Majesty at this moment, the court would expect and urge him to take the throne. Jinchi took a box from the folds of his robes. It was small enough to fit in the palm of his hand. Inside was a single golden pearl. It was about the size of a thumbnail, and its surface was flawless. Pearls of this size were extremely rare, especially in such fine condition. Even someone like Maomao could tell that a jewel like this would fetch a very high price. Even the cost of zhenzhu, a medical ingredient made by grinding pearls that weren't perfect, was considerable. Jinshi asked a generous gift to include with the portrait of a possible spouse, wouldn't you say? He continued, I won't question who sent it. I know you are too much of a gentleman to tell me anyway, the emperor said. Perhaps, but I imagine you can guess, your majesty. You could probably count on one hand the number of people who could and would send the emperor's younger brother a massive pearl, hoping that he would marry their daughter. And if anyone with those sorts of resources is trying to forge a connection with Jinshi, it would have to be either someone who stood to increase their own power from the match, or someone who sought to exercise indirect power through Jinshi. If that was the case, success would put them on equal footing with Empress Gyokyu, and there was one more thing. This time Jinshi took out a spoon. It was silver, but the metal was clouded. There had been poison in my tea at my office, and during one ritual someone shot an arrow at me. Did those things actually happen? Maomao thought to herself, if the news hadn't reached her ears, then Jinshi must have ordered everyone who knew about the matters to be silent. Some people wished to make Jinshi an ally, yes, but others saw him as an obstacle. This was the world of politics. Would you happen to know anything about any of this, Empress Gyokyu? Jinshi asked. No, nothing, Gyokyu replied, sounding faintly dismayed. No one believed the Empress herself was responsible for the attempts on Jinshi's life. However, there was always the possibility that one of her relatives was acting without her knowledge. That must have explained the tremor in her voice. If a member of her family was involved, her father Gyokyu seemed likely to have some part in the matter. Jinshi said, Your Majesty, you well know that I have absolutely no interest in being emperor, but the ruler did not nod at his words. Otherwise, why would I have spent 6 years pretending to be a eunuch in the rear palace? Maomao couldn't stop herself. She covered her ears, but Jinshi, smiling, took her wrists. He pried her hands away and placed them on her knees instead. He clearly wanted her to hear what he was going to say. Jinshi continued, I take no pleasure in such complicated matters. You have 2 sons, Your Majesty. Sir Gyokyu has received his name. Perhaps you would take this opportunity to grant me a name as well. Grant him a name. Maomao tilted her head. She looked from one person to the other, trying to understand what this meant. Then her eyes met Gyokyu's. She explained that to be granted a name was to become a servant of the emperor. In other words, it meant to leave the royal family. She still looked pale. Her words seemed to be less about Maomao's ignorance and more a way of asking Jinshi if he had understood correctly. Whoa. No, wait. Maybe it was complex and frankly annoying, the maneuvering one had to do as a member of the imperial line. But it could not be as simple as just asking to be let out of the family. There was one question Maomao had. How many men were currently in the imperial family? The former emperor's siblings had all died from disease. There might be maternal relatives that Maomao didn't know about. However, as far as she knew, the imperial males included only the emperor Jinshi, Empress Gyokyu's son, and another son born to consort Lihua. There were only 4 people, and the emperor's sons were still babies. A baby could die at any time, you simply did not know. No matter how diligently you cared for them, no matter how carefully you raised them, they might be felled by illness one day just like that. He will never get his wish. If even Maomao knew it, surely the emperor was aware of the fact. There was a loud clatter that shook the large table, and Maomao felt her hair stand on end. Some meat buns rolled off a plate. The source of the shaking was the emperor, who had pounded the table with his fist. His expression, usually friendly and somewhat neutral, was now a mask of anger. Please do. Defying the emperor could mean losing one's life. He was normally in such good spirits when Maomao met him that she had begun to lose some of her awe of him, just a little bit. Now she felt her heart race. She looked around the room, hoping one of the herbs could calm an angry disposition. Gyokyu's face had gone white. Perhaps this was the first time she had seen the emperor in a true fit of anger. Only Jinshi appeared unmoved. He said, You promised, did you not? Or do you intend to go back on your word, Your Majesty? Think carefully. Is this the time or the place to say such things? It is. If I don't settle this matter quickly, I will lose my chance to escape. Don't pour oil on the fire, Maomao thought as she felt herself start to sweat. She looked from Jinchi to the emperor and back again. Her eyes only occasionally wandered to the bezoar in the corner of the room. I wish I could look at that bezoar all day. Sadly, her modest dream was crushed. Will you not make me an ordinary person? Jinchi asked. A thwack filled the room. Jinchi sat down, face toward the ground. The emperor's fist was trembling. In spite of herself, Maomao went over to Jinchi and forced his mouth open. There were no broken teeth, just a split lip. He had taken a full committed punch to the face. Swelling would begin soon. Maomao wanted to check His Majesty's hand too, but she did not dare get near him. Is this why you insisted the apothecary not drink? The emperor asked, managing not to shout.